Back today doing a video here talking about some musical experiments, and specifically today talking about the thumb piano, the mbira, the kalimba, whatever you want to call it, and specifically talking about how to build these and how to maybe use them in some of your experiments, whether with the Coma field kit or other audio experiments. Let me actually turn the camera down here so you can see things. Okay, I think that's a little bit better. So what I first wanted to mention is that whether you are involved in building kalimbas or not, you can certainly take advantage and use the field kit. One of the nice things about it is that because you have the 4-channel mixer and the opportunity to use the included piezo mics, you essentially could do everything I'm doing here very simply. All you really have to do is take your field kit, take one of your piezo mics, and basically take any kalimba or thumb piano you might have and attach the microphone. You could, I suppose you could, one of the key things is just getting it fastened or affixed on your kalimba. You could certainly take, this is a pre-made kalimba that I actually did do a mod on and just put in my own piezo mic and a 1/4-inch jack, and I'll talk about that today, but I want to suggest that you could also use the included piezos that are part of the add-on for the field kit. You could essentially, tape it to the back. You always have to experiment in terms of your timbre, what sounds you want to get, right? Experiment moving the microphones around, experiment, as I'll talk about later, with different materials, different metal tines to attach to your bridge on your kalimba or thumb piano. So one of the things to think about is that if you are attaching anything, right, any piezo mic, you could use a variety of different types of tape. You could use the blue painter's tape, which doesn't have as much stick, but of course the advantage of that is it will allow you to put something on a delicate surface that maybe won't rip the thing apart. And I mention this because I tried some of these piezos I got just on Amazon. It's actually missing the inside disc, but they're really not great at all. They actually come with, they're advertised as like violin piezos, contact mics, but they're very temperamental, and if you put any kind of like tape on it, they often just come apart. So that's kind of an issue there. You could, of course, use the heavier duty, you could use, I guess, a masking tape. You could use electrical tape. Of course, this is going to have greater stick, and you might end up damaging your contact mics. The ones that come with the field kit are pretty sturdy, but still, I think that's a concern. That's why, for my liking, I would save using the supplied or expansion kit, field kit piezos for other sonic experiments. I tend to like to take the kalimbas that I make or modify and attach my own microphones to them. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, one of the things you can do is you can just pick up on Amazon or your favorite online outlet, wherever, a pre-built kalimba or thumb piano. So this is one of these. I think it was red originally, and I repainted it. And this is the original bridge that came with it, and the sound hole. And the only thing I did was I cut out a piece in the back, and I could have wood glued it, but I just actually, at the time when I was just getting started making some of these, put some duct tape. And on the inside, I have one piezo and a 1/4-inch output. And I wanted to mention this because I think if you're thinking about doing some of this, it's actually super easy. So you could get, basically pick these up on Amazon or eBay. These are just your 1/4-inch outputs, again, that you see on here. And it's like the easiest thing in the world to solder. And if I say this, it's really easy because I'm not necessarily amazing at soldering. So you can also pick up on eBay or Amazon for really cheap a set of contact mics of piezos. They're just these discs, and they don't come pre-wired. You can get the pre-wired, but I don't think it's really that hard to solder and to get this going. Basically, what you're going to do is strip two wires, just electrical wire, and you're going to take one from one on the outside of the disc, connect that to one of the terminals here, and then the other one solder here and connect it to the other terminal. If you're doing that simple circuit, I guess you'd call it, that's all you really need to do. It doesn't matter if you flip the wires. It doesn't matter which wire goes to which terminal here or here. Now, if you do more complex operations, I guess, or constructions where you use attenuators or you use three-way switches, which I've done on some of my other instruments, then it matters. But you can download on any cigar box guitar website the schematics to do this. It's super, super, super easy. So essentially, you're just going to take one piezo mic, two wires that are stripped, and solder them. And I really recommend using the rosin core solder. This makes a huge amount of difference. In addition to heating up your contact points when you solder, if you use the rosin core, it makes it so much easier, because one of the things you could do is ruin your piezo disc if you get it too hot, if you burn it, and so forth. So the other thing is you could have a soldering iron that actually has adjustable temperature, so you can control that a little bit. But very, very, very easy to do, and it's something really that doesn't take any time. But let's say you don't want to do that. If you, again, want to just get a kalimba and just use it as is, I don't have any tines in here, but let's use one of these that I actually built. This one's built just using a craft box, and actually, funny thing happened today. I was looking at it, and my jack, I didn't do the best job on here. It basically came loose. So what I'm going to do is just put in the, let me make sure I got a level here. Get this going. Okay. So I'm just going to use the field kit, right? So I'm going to just stick this in here. Please apologize. It's not going to sound great. But this, again, shows you maybe what you could do if you wanted to just use the field kit itself to buy a kalimba and then amplify it. Again, all you're going to do is put one microphone in one of the channels, adjust the gain, and I'm trying to just look on my computer here so I don't blow this too loud. Don't need much on here. I think I might have my mixer gain already cranked a little bit. Let's see. This doesn't have the best tone to it. Anyway, what I'm doing here is the microphone's bouncing around. Again, this is why you want to affix it somehow. But this particular kalimba, I just took a craft box and I put a piece of wood on the bottom. It's not the most beautiful looking instrument. And again, I put my jack in here, which has come loose, so I'm going to have to fix that. I drilled a sound hole in here because obviously that helps with the resonance. This box isn't as good as some of my others in terms of the sound, but I think it's, it's good enough for some of my purposes. And basically what I did on this one was I took these wooden skewers that I like to use for a lot of percussive stuff I do, and I use these as the tines of the thumb piano. And, they have a different sound to them than compared to some of the metallic keys that you might use. This is a terminal bar, and one of the things you can do that's really easy for your homemade kalimbas is to pick some of these up. I found that the big box stores, at least in the States, don't carry these. You can find maybe one or two. If you go on Amazon, they range in price from $2 as an add-on item up to maybe $7. You can get a variety of different number of terminals, so you can get up to, I think, 27. You can get as few as maybe 7 to 10 that I have on some of these. And basically what they allow you to do is two things. One is to attach essentially what I guess would be the bridge here in a traditional kalimba or thumb piano to your box or the wood that you're working with. These are particularly easy, and there's one company, I forget the name, that makes these. So this allows you very quickly to attach, say, 2 screws into your wood, drill your holes, and you're pretty much set. Then you take a screwdriver and you simply then would unscrew these and stick your tines, your keys, whatever you want to put in there for your metal, and then you're good to go. These would involve a little more work because you'd have to essentially put a screw up and then have that hold in the wood. So this is maybe not as easy to use. And there's an example of that right here. So that is this style essentially. It also has this guy up top. And what I did was I just put 2 screws in here and some nuts and then simply attached it to the board. And it's on there pretty solid. One of the things that you can read about online is that some kalimbas produce a lot of buzz, and I think you'll hear that with some of these later ones. So these are, I think, pretty handy to pick up because they allow you to quickly create an instrument. If you look at my my mega kalimba here, I think you can see it in the it's basically just right along here. So this has a variety of these terminals. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them. And I've just put different types of metal on here. Maybe I'll play that in a little bit, and I'll get to what I've used for the tines or the keys. But you can use a variety of different sources to create essentially the keys to play your kalimba. So again, the terminal bars are really handy to pick up if you want to use those as your device to mount. Otherwise, your other option would be to use something similar to this. I should have brought an example, but I one time created one using 2 pieces of metal or a piece of wood and then a metal on top. I sawed off with a Dremel the end of a teaspoon measuring spoon, and then I put that on the wood, and then that allowed me to create pretty tight contact, because the key is that with either this version or this version, you can get a very secure fit for whatever it is that you're using. If I use traditional kalimba, these are actually ones that came with this particular one. The key is that I want it to be very tight in there such that it produces that sound when I stroke the key, and that's obviously a key part of that. You can hear that just with the lavalier mic. But so this gives you that option. You can create your own bridge, or you could use, again, the terminal bar that very easily allows you to screw things in. Now, with some of these, like these actually would be too large for a lot of these spaces in here, these holes. So that's why you might end up using bobby pins or hairpins, which are really quite good in terms of creating a nice sound when they're attached in one of these terminal bars. And we'll get to the keys or the tines in a second. So let me just mention then a little bit about the box. Again, you can use any variety of wood, any type of wood you want. These craft boxes are, I think, kind of handy. They're pretty good in terms of resonating, because one of the things you want with a kalimba, traditional kalimba, uses wood, right, or could use a gourd, and then it creates its own echo chamber, right? It's its own reverberation system. You often see a sounding hole on the top, and of course you see this with cigar box guitars as well, and then sometimes you'll see some additional sound holes on the back. It just kind of depends. So if you buy a traditional one on Amazon, and again, these are as cheap as like 10 bucks, that's already done for you. If you make your own, you could get one of these craft boxes, you could paint it or stain it. This is just a particular type of stain. As you can see, it's one of these craft boxes. And then you can just attach some wood to it. You could put some screws in the back. You could put some felt pads in here as well if you want to keep your tabletop or whatever nice and not get it scratched. And then essentially you're just going in and doing a couple of holes. You'll have to get a fairly big, I don't know if it'd be a 1/2 inch offhand, but if you want to create your soundboards, right, you could drill right in there to do that. And then you could also drill in and create the opening for your 1/4 inch output, or you could use 1/8 inch outputs. I didn't mention that, but if you're using the field kit, just because of form factor and not wanting big cables and a lot of space, you could make a really small kalimba and then get the 1/8 inch that are going to match up with the 1/8 inch inputs for, say, the piezos on the field kit. Everything on there essentially is 1/8 inch, so it's a little easier in terms of the form factor, basically. But beyond that, again, what you're essentially going to do is you'll get your, if you're making your own, you're going to get your piezo mic, and it's probably going to be something like this. Again, you can experiment. If it's a small kalimba, I don't see a need for, say, you could do 2 of these in parallel or series, experiment. You could stick in an attenuator, which I've done in some of my other instruments, which I don't think is necessary in a kalimba. I mean, basically, you're going to pick up the sound of the keys resonating, and you're going to record that. You're going to run that through effects pedals, whatever it is that you do. You could put it in combination with the envelope follower on the field kit. That could be really fun to trigger some of your CV gear, so you get some nice feedback systems between, say, using the kalimba and connecting it to the field kit and using the field kit to route signals into your CV gear. So these are really easy. Essentially, you get your piezos on there, you put your output, you have a jack, and you're good to go. Attaching these, by the way, you could use contact cement is really easy. I think the easiest, the least messy. Just put a little disc there, stick it on there. It usually contact cement takes in a couple of minutes, and in an hour or two is completely solid. It's not going anywhere. You could also use epoxy, but I find epoxy a little bit messier to work with, and it takes a little longer to dry. It's going to do the same thing essentially. And then again, all you're going to do is very simply beforehand, typically, I guess, you would solder your 2 wires to your output jack, and you would essentially have your kalimba. So very, very, very easy to do. This one is a box that I got set up and I haven't used yet, so we'll use that eventually. This one I was trying to look at and use, and maybe I'll plug it in a second here so you can hear some of the sounds. What I wanted to do on this one was to experiment just with different sounds. This isn't necessarily, I'm not a professional kalimba player, but this one essentially is another one of those art boxes, a bigger one, and I put the piece of wood on the bottom. I also put some felt pads to save tabletops. And then I put in, on this one I think I've got 2 piezo mics. I did 2 small sound holes on the top, and as you can see, it's a pretty good resonance. We're picking up some of the rattling also of the terminal bars. By the way, if you read about kalimbas online, you'll notice, and you'll hear it on this one, you often get some significant buzz. You will sometimes hear sounds of the tines, maybe sounds of the bridge, or in this case, the terminal bars. And that often creates an unpleasant sound. But again, if you're doing noise experiments, you might like that. You can go in and adjust some of the buzz and take care of that, certainly, after you've created your instrument. Oh, another thing I was going to mention, I haven't done this yet, but you could also use, a lot of thumb pianos may have bottle caps that actually provide some rattle. So I actually picked up some bottle caps on eBay and wanted to attach them to this thumb piano, but I haven't gotten around to that. So you can do a lot of experimentation when you get into what the sonic properties might be. Now maybe we should talk about the tines, the keys for the thumb piano you might want to use. Before I mention that or talk about that, sometimes I was going to say when you put on if you're working with these small boxes, sometimes I find like I don't have small enough screws to make it in terms of these very small dimensions here on the edges of the boxes. So I actually picked up on Amazon some of these really small screws. These are almost like the size of screws you see on guitar pedals that are often really tiny. And so sometimes it's hard to find these in hardware stores. The screws I find are not small enough. So I also picked up some of those, and then when I make my boxes and I'm doing the final stage, which is attaching the bottom after I've done all the guts, the electronic stuff inside, I just put 4 of those there. If it's a longer one like this giant kalimba, I have a series of screws, of course, down the sides and the edges. So I wanted to mention that just in case you're building your kalimba. So now the next thing is, what are you going to use for the keys to create the distinct sound? And actually we can use this one here to show you some of the differences. Okay, I was just trying to get my levels set here. So this is going to sound really buzzy, but in other words, one of the things you might want to think about is what can you use to create the sound for your keys. I find sometimes that the hairpins are really good. Again, we're getting a lot of buzz on here. You can use different size of hairpins that you'll find in any store to produce an effect of sonically. It could be quite interesting. You know, run this through some delays or distortion, reverb, and you get some really nice sounds. You can just hear different keys, and these are not tuned. But you can tell, right, that each is different. You're hearing a ton of buzz, but some of that I think can be pleasant. And then even something like a paperclip has, I think, a potential use on here. So what I basically have done is I've collected, and I have like a set of just different pins. So again, these are small pins. These particular ones are kind of handy. I've used on on a different instrument I don't have out here. But basically what you often do is you bend them into shape how you want them to be. And this particular one I sometimes find is interesting because I use it with as a percussive effect, and so I could make like a little square or something like this, and then I can do as I'm playing. And that was the other thing I should mention. You can also use a kalimba in a percussive way to play. And I think, you know, it's pretty cool, the sound. Again, you can do so much with taking something like that and running it through whatever you want to run it through. You could put it through Ableton, you can affect it on your computer, you can affect it with guitar pedals, whatever. So that's what's pretty cool. And when you play it as a percussion instrument, I think it totally changes. The timbre really goes in an entirely different direction. So you might think about that when you're working on what you're going to use for the keys. Again, you could use different size. I've even taken hair combs and try to saw these off and use these, and they didn't have exactly the resonance as some of the other ones here. You could go to hardware stores and find different clamps. That might be useful. Just experiment again. You could use the original keys that come with the kalimba, as we talked about earlier. You can use a combination of sizes, so use these thin ones. That's going to sound different when they reverberate, resonate, versus the longer ones, the bigger ones. And so if you get a variety of maybe 2 or 3 of these, you could, even with, say, a kalimba like this one, put those in there. Think about how you want to play it. Again, it's entirely up to you if you want to actually play it as traditional keys or you want to play it as a percussion instrument, as I said, with some sort of stick, something to beat the keys. You could have a variety of different timbres or sonic effects as you go about trying to create something interesting that works for your setup. The other thing I should mention as far as keys that work really, I think really well, I don't think I have any of these. I have one set up on the big kalimba. I actually picked up a set of jigsaw blades, and these work really well. You don't want to cut yourself, obviously, but if you just play them on this end, it very much resembles like the traditional Kalimba Time or key. So these work quite well. They're metal, and I think they have nice reverberation. So that's another option for you to think about maybe as you're producing or thinking about creating your own instrument from scratch. Okay, actually, I thought we could look at so we close the discussion here of making your kalimba. Again, this particular mega kalimba, as I call it, has a variety of different times or keys on it that allow you to play with different sonic possibilities, including everything from a ruler here to these are metal bars that you could pick up in any hardware store. These are probably a little too close. Here's another one. And you can see each of these then has a different quality to them. I saw these shorter. You could, if you were meticulous, you could take these and you could very easily tune with your phone or a traditional tuner to get maybe the pitches that you want. That's the other side of this, is if you want to actually create, say, a chromatic instrument, that's going to be a little higher level in terms of just getting everything tuned to where you want it to be. And that's the difference if you buy a really good kalimba for $100, a chromatic one in particular, versus say like a typical, maybe a pentatonic one that has you know, just a few keys on it. That's going to allow for different musical possibilities. If you're not concerned about that, then obviously you can just use it as I use it for some of the sonic possibilities. Down on this end, these are longer ones, so they have a different sound. And here's one of the jigsaw blades. You can see it has a nice ring to it. Different quality to it. I also have some stuff I added here that aren't really traditional to a kalimba. This allows me to create some effects on the keys when I strike it. Sometimes, you know, if you put almost like a prepared piano, think John Cage, right, where you take other pieces of material and you put them in between keys, you could create additional sonic possibilities. You could use a snare thingy there, forgetting what those are called. That also allows for you know, some different sonic opportunities. Down here are the more traditional. This is actually a combination. Let me just make sure the camera, yeah, we can see it pretty well. So I mentioned earlier that I have some of the, these are actually some of the official, at the end here, these are the kalimba keys that came with this kalimba that I got on Amazon. These here are part of this, which I sawed off. And then the other ones here, I cut down those really long clips I showed you earlier, like these. I cut these a little shorter to get a higher pitch. So this has kind of like, this is like the treble sort of octave or side of the instrument. And then again, some of these are much lower and have different sonic possibilities. But here's the sound of that. You can also do glissandos, of course. So that's, you know, something else you could do with an instrument like this. Again, this particular one, it wouldn't be practical, I think, to play it by hand. You could, but it'd be pretty hard. So I typically use some kind of percussive mallet or something, in this case one of my skewer sticks, and I play it that way. Again, you can hear some of the different sounds here. And then the paper clips in particular, I think are really cool. And I kind of just discovered this. I had some of the long paper clips. I actually had one of these long paper clips and I ordered some more. I couldn't find them, but they ended up having, I think, a really cool timbre to them. And so that, you know, again, gives you a different sound. What I like about this particular instrument is that it allows me sonically to really experiment with some different opportunities based on whatever tine or key I'm using to attach to the grounding bar. I should also say, I'll show you maybe the schematic of what's on the inside of this instrument. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 outputs, which maybe is overkill, but on a long instrument like this, you could string together a bunch of piezo's and have one output. I thought what might be cool is if I'm playing it with two sticks, is I could have different outputs going into my mixer, recording those, and then I could do some stuff with panning. I could also take different outputs, different cables, I could run those into different effects pedals, essentially create a really kind of like Frankenstein's monster of kalimbas, such that I could have, you know, different octaves or different areas of the kalimba, of these 7 areas, playing into different effects pedals to create different sonic possibilities. And I think that's what's really cool about creating something like this, is that you can really experiment with the sounds that are out there. Again, you can go, as I talked about in the Bricolage Garage video, raid your garage, find stuff that maybe works, buy a few things, create some instruments, and really explore some of the sonic possibilities that are out there in terms of electroacoustic instruments. So that's all I wanted to say today about Kalimbas. I thought I'd do a video on this because certainly there's a lot of interest out there in creating your own instruments and exploring some of the sonic possibilities that are out there in terms of electroacoustic music. So I will talk to you at a future time in another video, and wish you luck on your sonic avant-garde experiments wherever they take you in your musical worlds.